All right. We've started another episode of the Business Blind Spots Exposed podcast. And what I'd like to do is first start out by telling you what the Business Blind Spots Exposed podcast is all about. As the CEO of Carmo, we help companies and support companies in building intentional culture through data. But what does that data do for you? It helps build greater employee engagement and retention, greater productivity, better customer experience. There's numerous various aspects to what data can help you do. But what data do you look at? That's really the question. And we call those the blind spots. And the purpose of our Business Blind Spots Exposed is to find out what are those blind spots that you can find, because just on the other side of those blind spots is where real success or the next layer of being for your company is. And that's what we do on this podcast. So let me tell you about some of the people that we've got coming up in a couple of weeks. We've got on March 23rd, we've got Edmund Mackey, who's coming to us to talk about delivering on a company vision and an approach and how that leads through the data and how you can build into that. On March 18th, we've got Ryan Ray, the numbers behind people re-engaged, a really unique perspective in what he does as a company and how he gets people re-engaged in the workforce and what are the key tricks there. On March 16th, we've got Troy Vermillion come in and said it's a showcase for data-driven HR, how numbers lead to better HR. But today, I've got Jerel Bonner, and the topic of our podcast is unlocking higher performance and engagement in employees. I want to say hi to Jerel in a quick second here, but I got a bio that we've compiled and taken some time to look through. I want you to understand a little bit more about who Jerel is and what Jerel Bonner has done. First of all, if you start to look through his bio, you start to see, gosh, he is an accomplished speaker. He's spoken at so many places, including TEDx. He's the author of Sharpening China's Talent. He says, I am a human behavior awareness consulting, advising and coaching senior level executives. He helps others confront reality so they can learn how to reach their full potential. All the stuff that you need in an organization to really unlock the next level. He has spent more than 14 years coaching as an executive coach and supporting multinational corporations in China. He's got a sharp eye for observing and measuring behaviors that deliver desired results within organizations. Gosh, in the areas of expertise, Jerel, I love this. Executive leadership, talent development, business impact mapping, sales and marketing, office culture, personal behavior, and performance measurements. I just, looking through your background, Jerel, I see a lot of potential in terms of unlocking blind spots for people. So how are you doing today?
Well, I can see you really well. So that's the internet's working. I'm doing pretty good. So just so you know, one of the things that I don't really write down on my LinkedIn profile or out on the web is I'm pretty good at checking out, seeing opportunity in the markets as well. But we're not here to talk about that. But otherwise, I'm lucky. I'm grateful that I've not had any major issues due to the conditions that we have experienced in the past year. I'm lucky that nothing's happened to me that's required medical attention, and financially I'm still okay. So I can't really complain.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of people who have gone through some tough times in the last year plus now. Right?
Yeah, it's been ugly for some people.
Well, one thing I do want to make a note here is that we are live, and this is an interactive discussion. So please, anybody who's in live, tell us where you're from, where you're calling in from, where you're dialing in from. I would love to. I don't know if you can use that word anymore because it's all internet.
Where are you dialing in from, really?
Where are you connecting from? That's probably the right term. So, Jerel, first thing that came to mind is intentional versus accidental culture. There's a huge difference there. Tell me, what does that mean to you? Intentional versus accidental culture. What does that mean to you? And tell me unpack that for me.
Sure. So most companies are accidental culture. So they wait for it to happen. They put the values and beliefs up on the wall, and they maybe hand out coffee mugs and stuff with that information on it. But that's all it is. It's wall decorations, it's coffee mugs, and There's no like, hey, did we actually do anything that made that happen this week? And and how do they actually drill those things down to each of the positions? So by that I mean, do managers have conversations about how employees' behavior matches the culture and the specifics related to that culture, and that and intentionally have those conversations about it. So culture at a very high level is basically beliefs and values converted into language and behavior. And those language and behaviors repeated over time become customs and traditions. So if you do something every month and then you do that for 5 years, it's a tradition. If you do it every month for a year and you stop, well, it was a custom. So it's really hard for companies to create customs and traditions that last over years. And so if you want them to last over years, you've got to be intentional and make it happen.
So let break that down for me a little more. So you said accidental because a lot of people just kind of let things just happen. You're saying that people have got to lean into it and say, this is what I want. This is what I want, as in perhaps senior leadership. They've got to lean in and say, this is the behavior that I want in an organization. It doesn't happen because you just will it. It's because you actually translate that into behaviors that people can follow.
People can see, right? And actually with senior level management has to actually demonstrate and activate the behaviors, and they have to model the behaviors. So the new phrase today in our world, Vinny, I said that wrong. I'm sorry. Vinay. In today's world, we say leaders got to model the behavior. That's nothing new. That's not special. It's not unique, because in the 70s, John Wooden, the famous coach of the UCLA, would tell people, hey, if you want to be a leader, show it on the court, show it by your behavior, and then others will follow. So we're just repackaging it into new language of, let's make it sound unique and new. Okay, it's the new Charmin, right? It's squeezier and softer because we're saying model a behavior, but it's something that was talked about many, many years ago. So if leaders don't model the behavior, they shouldn't expect their direct reports to do it, especially when you get into things like integrity and you get into things like integrity and trust, right? You can't expect employees to trust you if you're not trustworthy.
So I remember hearing the phrase growing up as a kid, do as I say, not as I act. And basically what I'm hearing from you is that doesn't work.
It does not work. No.
You got to do as you do. You got to do as you do. And that's it.
Right.
So talk me through this idea of, so someone's got core values posted up on the wall. Here's what we believe, customer comes first, yada, yada, yada. That's all fine and good. It doesn't mean a hill of beans until you act it.
Right.
How do people make that shift? Because, I mean, you may think you're already doing it, or maybe that's the question there. Are there a lot of people who believe that they're acting the culture but actually aren't? And that's kind of where the problem is?
That's really true, yes. They think they're acting the culture, but they're not, because nobody's saying thank you for doing it, and nobody's saying that doesn't align with the behavior of the values and beliefs. So I'll give you an example of how this gets incidental, okay, not intentional. So many, many, many years ago, when I was working for a bank that no longer exists, it was Christmas Eve. I was home in bed after being at my in-laws for Christmas Eve dinner. And the phone rings at about 12 o'clock midnight. And I answer it, and it's my boss. And I say, "What's up, Eddie?" And Eddie goes, "Jerel, I need your help." I'm like, "What's wrong?" And he's like, "Well, it's been 20 degrees for the last 5 days." I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, and today it got into the 40s. Well, some pipes broke in the bank, and our basement with all our equipment is flooded. And I'm here alone cleaning it up. Can you come help me tonight?" And so I said, "Sure, I'll see you in about a half hour." And, my ex looked at me and said, "Where are you going? It's midnight." I'm like, "Ed's in the office, he's cleaning up this mess." And she's like, "Yeah, well, you don't need to go. It's Christmas Eve night. What are you doing? I'm like, well, yeah, it's Christmas Eve night. He doesn't want to be there either. He wants to get home to be with his family tomorrow morning. So I got to help him get out. And, I'm going in. Now, nobody told me to do that. Nobody said, Jerel, that's leadership. Nobody said, Jerel, that's authentic leadership. And nowhere did we have conversations that said that's the kind of thing you should do when it happens. I just did it. But it was accidental because it was not something that was it was unconscious competence, but it was a unique one-off.
So let me kind of repeat back to you what I heard. Right, I think the culture there, because your boss called and said, "Hey, I need some help," you felt, even though it was Christmas Eve, middle of the night, hey, this is something I want to be part of, and that is because the culture was already set in advance, and there was a precedent for that, which is what compelled you to go forward with it. Is that right?
No.
Okay.
So I'm glad you said it. You asked that. There was no cult. It was, I cared about my boss because I care about people. And it would be wrong to leave him there at the end of the night. And there was no culture training, no management lessons, no posters on the wall that said care about your employees. I just care about your people. I just got up and did it because it was me and that's who I am. Does that clarify it?
I think it does. Um, so, as a company, or as a person who does consulting for a lot of companies, look, the name of the podcast is Business Blind Spots Exposed. What do you see is the outcome of not building that proper culture? Again, leaving it to accidental versus building intentional. What is the variance in outcome for that company because they let it be accidental versus intentional? What happens? Why? What is the word?
Well,
Tell me a
it doesn't stick. It doesn't gain
Okay.
traction. You don't become known in the marketplace for it. That's one of the outcomes, right? So I'll give you a great quote here. Are you familiar with Baker Roofing?
I am.
Do you know their slogan?
I don't.
Okay, so Baker Roofing, their culture and their belief system is we shall do good work at a profit if we can, at a loss if we must, but always good work. Right? So that's really simple, right? It's very simple. And it's one question. Did you do good work? Don't worry about whether or not we made money today. And if our customers could tell us we do good work, and we always do good work, and if we don't worry about losing money and we always do a great job, we'll get enough customers to stay in business. And it's real simple. It's not complicated. Did you do good work?
So what that does is it aligns the behaviors of those who work for the company around that specific cultural objective. So it makes
Mm-hmm.
them, it gives them the measuring stick as to whether they're doing right or wrong.
Yeah. And that's anybody can answer that question. Did I do good work? You don't need a whole lot of, I know you're in the data measurement and I totally agree. You got to measure it, but doesn't take a whole lot of every day you can ask yourself, did I do good work today? You can't say yes,
So the beautiful thing about that is it's something that everybody can sign on for, someone that they can enroll themselves in that process, that behavior, and that culture. And then they know that that's the measuring stick that they can use every single day to see if they're doing right or wrong.
Right. No matter what engagement they have, they can always stop and go, if I do X, is it good work or is it bad work? If it's bad work, I don't do it. It's a simple question, right? And Zappos has, their metrics and their 10 commandments of how to do, live their culture, and they know how to see the behavior, right? And so if we look at Baker Roofing, it's real simple. Every time that employee hears, you did good work, that was great work, that was wonderful work, then they know they're on target. It doesn't take a whole lot.
So, okay, the way you've just unpacked that makes it seem to me that this is kind of an easy task to some degree.
No, it's easy for Baker.
It's easy. It's easy for
It's
Baker.
easy for Baker.
Why
Yeah.
why doesn't anyone do this? What's so hard about it? I mean, it seems like that slogan was kind of I know I'm purposely making this a little easier than it actually is.
Yeah.
Why doesn't everyone do it?
Well, because it gets tougher the more. So first off, it gets tougher the more values you have. So I'm talking with one company right now. They have 8 values,
Hmm.
and that's like on the high end. There was a market report I saw last year that said companies should have between 3 and 5, and 8 is really on the high side. So they make them too complicated. They don't model the behavior. They don't give the feedback when they see it, and they don't give feedback when they don't see it. So if you don't give the feedback to say you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong, then nobody knows, right? So
Hmm. Gosh, that's so really interesting. It seems like it's kind of something that's right there in front of you, but taking the time to do it is the challenge. I mean, it's the discipline is the challenge of taking the time to do it. But when you do it, what is the positive outcome of it? I mean, I feel like everybody knows or has a general sense of a good culture in a company is the right place to work, and that's the place that people want to be. But it's the lift and the work of setting up the culture that takes some time and intention, and you got to keep practicing what you preach. Is that where
yep.
people get stuck?
Yeah, it's heavy lifting. So I give you a story analogy to that. So when people ask me today, was it tough to study Chinese? I say no, and people look at me like, no, not hard. It was easy to study Chinese. I'm like, no, it wasn't easy to study Chinese, but it took hard work. But doing the work was not hard. It just meant I had to intentionally find time to study. I intentionally had to practice. I had to practice my writing. I spent hours practicing my writing. I spent hours in language exchange with other people, and it was that hard work of discipline was what was hard. But actually learning the language once I got started and once I got in it was actually pretty easy. It's just homework.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing here is that if you care enough to build the culture, it will come because you continue to apply continued discipline and effort to it, because it just doesn't set up like that. You continually apply effort towards getting that culture right.
Mm-hmm.
And then it actually starts to manifest itself. You'll make some mistakes along the way, but it's just like anything. I mean, if you're starting a company, you're going to make lots of mistakes along the way anyway. Nobody gets it right on the first try. But the culture, if you continue to care about what the outcome is for the benefit of your employees and your customers and things, the culture will start to come by itself. Did I get that
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it does. So to give you a work-related example, when I was with LinkedIn in China, I wanted to give my peers feedback on the LinkedIn values and culture, and I didn't see it. So it was really hard for me. I mean, I went looking for it, and I couldn't find it. And it was like, because nobody, everybody was hunkered down in their desks trying to meet their goals and, get their meeting appointments and go see their clients and get their proposals in and close the deals, because I was on with the sales team. And they didn't really make decisions that were good. LinkedIn China is 60% owned by Chinese companies, which most people don't know. So it had a very true Chinese culture, and bringing the American culture of collaboration and think like a boss and be entrepreneurial, some of those things that they had, the Chinese just didn't accept it. And I'll give you a real simple example. We had an intern at LinkedIn China while I was there. And, a couple times a week, I'd go up and talk to her and see how she was doing. And she's like, you're the only one that talks to me. I'm like, well, do they give you work? And she's like, not enough. I'm like, I'm going to give you all the work you want. I didn't ask my boss for that. I just was like, okay, she's an intern. She's here to learn something. She's a nice young lady. She's a college student. So I'm going to make sure she has a good experience. But nobody else really cared about her.
Yeah. Wow. So I want to shift our focus a little bit here to the data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because as a company, we're constantly collecting data so you can start to get this unbiased and objective measures of how people are how they're performing in their roles. What that unbiased and objective performance, I think in the way I think about it, and this is where I would love to hear your thought, constantly telling people how they're doing against some measuring stick. I feel like a lot of folks are saying, I'm a little scared to do that. I don't want to tell them how they rank on a scale of A to F, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever. Actually, that might be the best thing in my thinking, is always kind of tell them, here's where you are, here's where you are, here's where you are. So if they choose, they can opt in to doing better because they want to. Am I thinking right there? Is by constantly setting clear expectations in front of people and how they're doing, does that actually make culture happen easier?
That makes results easier. It doesn't make culture easier. So I remember many years ago, I saw a post on LinkedIn about customer service, and what this store had customer service real-time intelligence in the front. So imagine you're at the checkout center, right? You're paying your bill or whatever, or you're at the customer service window. And when you finish, it says, how is our service? So I remember Bank of China would always do this. Every time you did something with a teller, if the teller turned on the switch, a little button would come up, would say, how is my service? Good, medium, or bad? And so on the data side of what you're talking about, every customer got the chance to hit good, bad, or better. But we only had those three options, right? So they could tell who worked Monday morning from 8 to 12 and how many good, average, great, times did the customer click out of how many times the customer was there. But they never asked, well, why is it good? Why is it bad? Why was it average? So if I waited 40 minutes to do something, I dinged it. I said, this is poor service because I waited 40 minutes. Had nothing to do with the teller. Right? Now, on the other side of the coin, this one thing I saw on LinkedIn was, imagine that, what this company actually did was they put a digital TV display on the wall. So after you and I clicked our customer survey, after we finished, it gave us, we could see, and the employee could see the number right then and there of their customer satisfaction for that day. So the way in your world, if you collect that data, so in my world and the teller's world or the customer service agent's world, they see that response that says happy face, sad face, even face, real time. So, you start out, first customer says, great, boom, happy face. Second customer says, great, happy face. Third customer says, bad, unhappy face. Oh, it went down. The employee automatically knows I didn't give that person good service. And they can go back and go, what did I do for the first two people that day? And what did I do for the third person?
So this is really interesting because I, as a background, being an analyst, working around data for a long time, the data doesn't actually tell you the story. It just gives some perspective as to what the story might be. And I think that's kind of what I'm hearing from you here, right? Is that if you want to actually build a culture, the data just tells you kind of where the answer might be. Because I think so many people think, oh, data, I got to answer. No. That's the furthest thing from the truth. The data just simply tells you there's some more questions to be asked. Is that kind of what you're saying as well?
Yeah, and it could say that, and it could also just say this person doesn't care, or this person does great. I mean, because if the person's constantly getting a 10 all the time, right, then they're the best performer because they're constantly getting 10. So you don't need the metadata because the data is always 10. So if you look at Zappos, I mean, they're well known for their customer service. They're never tracked for, I'll give you a perfect example. Zappos never tracks customer service length of calls. They just say it's not important to the job because you're called customer service. You and I could get on the phone right now, call Zappos customer service and order pizza, and they would help us find the right pizza place. And they would not say, well, you're not ordering shoes, get lost. In fact, I know a TV show host, like they had nothing planned for the TV show. So the host just turned around and called Zappos support and talked for 30 minutes to Zappos support. That was their TV show that day. We're talking, Zappos is that great. Let's see what they do with us for 30 minutes. So
So
now the bad side, okay? I'm going to forget the bad side. The bad side is, when you go to somebody, you ask for help and they brush you off and they tell you, oh, I know where I wanted to go with the bad side. I listened to a podcast with, Michael Lewis called Break the Rules or something like that, or, something like that, something about the rules, right? And the United States government has outsourced student loan payments to a collection agency for students that are behind the ball. Oh, and the name of the podcast is Michael Lewis, the 7-Minute Rule. This vendor that's working for the government to help give people loan support, because the government has a law that says if you go to school and then you go to work in public education, or you go to work as a fireman or an EMS, something like that, we're going to waive your loan. You don't have to pay your student loan back. And this company gets paid based on how much interest the government collects on the loans. So every time you pick up the phone and say, hey, I'd like to get into this loan program so I can have my loan paid off, or whatever they call it, paid back. I can't remember the term. They have the 7-minute rule. Do not let anybody stay on the phone more than 7 minutes and drop them, because we don't want to solve their problem. We want them to pay as much interest as possible, because that's how we get paid. So the incentive of the data is, you go over 7 minutes, the boss is going to be like, why did you talk to that person for more than 7 minutes? Why did you give them the right answer to get through this program and have their loan forgiven? We don't want you. And, it's costing millions and millions of dollars to students paying loans. They can't get their loan forgiven. And the government said, we'll do it for you. So that's the data telling the employees that do the loan service, get off the phone in 7 minutes.
So this is really interesting. As part of what we do as a company is we kind of go to, well, not kind of, we go to companies and we say, gosh, measuring people based on KPIs, just performances. For example, when we work with field service and trade companies, lots of times they'll look at how many times someone was speeding. And, if you got, X number of raps on the knuckle for speeding, we need to start thinking about an action with that employee. Mm. And my first response to them, I said, well, first of all, hold on. You've made that such a binary issue there. Is there ever a situation where speeding is actually a good thing? And the typical response is, no, of course not. I said, now, what if that employee was actually trying to hurry to get to the next customer because they fell behind, because they spent 3 more minutes talking to the customer they were with, wrapping things up, and they needed to give them those 3 minutes. So they're stepping on the gas to get to that next customer on time so that they don't do it. Is that an opportunity for speeding to have been good in that case? Yes, there's some risk and things like that. Agreed. But I said, now you're just looking purely at the data where they're speeding, but there's not enough of the story there. And I think this is part of where you're going, is that there's a deeper narrative. In order to be able to build the right kind of culture, you got to get to that deeper narrative before you really understand if the data is helping you or not.
Yeah. So the blind spot exposed that Vinay is real based on your scenario is, why are you not teaching the employee how to say to the customer, look, you wouldn't want me, you like that I showed up on time for you, right? Yeah. And the customer goes, yes. So I have to end this conversation now so I can end up on time for my next appointment without driving unsafe. But if the company doesn't teach the employee how to have that conversation with the customer, then it just looks like the employee saying to the customer, look, I got to go, bye. And honestly, it's happened to me. I mean, I've had people say, you rushed out the door. I'm like, well, yeah, I stayed 20 minutes late and we started late. I stayed 20 minutes late. I worked longer on the service that I offered you, and I needed to go to my next appointment, and you wouldn't let me go. So yeah, I ran out, but we booked 2.5 hours. I'm 3 hours into the deal. I need to go. And yeah, I tried to be polite, but if you do that, if the customer does that 3 or 4 times, well, but if you don't teach was I wrong for rushing out the door? Maybe. We told the client we needed to go, I mean, why would the client think we're going to hang around their office all day, right? After doing extra work.
Well, so here, I think there's something else to tease out here is by having that measuring stick, something that the the employee can talk to that customer about, saying, "Look, I want to be very respectful in this conversation here, but I arrived here on time, and that's really important to me. But I need to be able to do the same for my next customer." That gives them a place to speak from. That is not about them saying, "Hey, want to be a terrible employee or a terrible service provider to you." I'm coming from a place of this is what we believe as a company, and that's a much better place, a safer place for that employee to come from, which actually probably makes that employee feel even better too. Right?
That's intentional. So when management says, look, here's how to tell the customer service is important, and part of customer service is being on time for all appointments. Then you say, look, one of our cultures is to provide great service, and being on time for our appointments is important. And I have 3 calls today, and I have to leave on time so I can get to those 3 other calls because those people are waiting. You would not like me to be late for you, and I was not late for you, and I don't want to be late for them. And I pride myself on never being late to an appointment. So I'd appreciate it if I can go now. If you have further questions, you can call my boss. You can call me tomorrow. And say that's our company belief. We'll do good work at a must, right? We'll do it at a loss if we have to, but we'll do good work. To do good work, I don't want to get a speeding ticket. My company's because if I get a speeding ticket, my company's car insurance goes up, and I can't. They don't want that, and I don't want it either. I don't want it on my driver's license, and I don't want to disappoint my other customer. I didn't disappoint you. I won't disappoint them. Thank you for understanding.
I want to bring up another, what I think is a blind spot. I'd love to hear what you think of this. I see a lot of people complaining or saying as a challenge for them is keeping good employees, retaining good employees, and finding new good employees. How does the culture relate to that?
Well, if you have a culture that is really good and really strong, people find you, you don't find them. Right. So if you work for a really good company, like again, I'll use my story about I'll use my LinkedIn story. Everybody I knew in China thought I should work for LinkedIn. They're like, man, you really understand this platform. You know how to use it. You know how to get the right numbers. You really understand how to build a profile. You really have a different mindset of how to leverage the platform. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And so they said I should work for LinkedIn. And then one day I went and was doing a presentation at a HR conference in Shanghai, and the guy speaking after me was the number 2 guy from LinkedIn. And at the break, I went up and talked to him, and we had a chat. And I said, this is what I know about LinkedIn, and this is where I know about your culture. And he's like, we should talk. And 3 weeks later, he's like, I'm coming to Shanghai. I want to talk to you about a job. Because he's like, he didn't have to go find me. I didn't have to. No resume into an ATS, no, phone screen. I'm talking to the decision maker, and he's like, I'm going to give you a job. Come join us.
So I'm going to distill some of that. If you build this culture, you spend the time and the effort to build a culture, you're not trying to keep people in the company. You're not trying to attract people into the company. You become a magnet by yourself. People, I'll say there's some golden handcuffs on each company, each employee in the company, because they don't want to leave because they love being there. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. They don't want to leave. And so I'll tell you a really interesting story. When I got my Spectrum, when I switched internet providers and got Spectrum, it didn't work in the apartment. And it took several people to come out. And this one guy came out, the last guy that came out and did good work. He's like, I had this job and they gave me a hard time, and I lost family during COVID, and then an aunt got sick during COVID. So they gave me a hard time about my attendance and my working situation because I wasn't in the office, in the warehouse. He goes, it's COVID. I got people dying because of COVID, and they're raking me over the coals about my attendance. And to show you how stupid they were, They said to him, "You disappeared for 2 hours." He goes, "What day did I disappear for 2 hours?" And they said, "Oh, it wasn't one day. We went through 6 months of videotape from your workstation and found 2 minutes here, 3 minutes here, 5 minutes here, 6 minutes there, 3 minutes here. And all that added up to 2 hours." And I'm thinking, Vinay, you tell me, how much time do you think that manager spent watching video to find 2 hours of this guy disappearing? More than 2 hours.
Yeah, it seems like at that point in time you're so leaning this in this direction of being reactive
Right.
and trying to catch people, as opposed to be on the other side where you're trying to enable and empower them to do what they
Yeah.
want, right? I
And
mean,
all that guy wanted to do was have a good day's work. He's like, yeah, so I got this job with Spectrum and I go driving around the neighborhood and I fix people's internet problems and I make them smile and I show up on time and I don't take too long and I fix the problem accurately and I go home safe. He goes, that's a good day's work for me. That's all I want to do is a good, honest day's work. And, Spectrum gave me a job right away because I got the skills to pull cable. He's like, he's an older gentleman. He's like, I don't need 20 years here. I don't have a career path. I just need to pay my bills for the next 5 years till I go on Social Security and Medicaid. I'm going to be happy here as long as they don't slap him around and treat him like a jerk.
yeah. Wow. So how does, gosh, I mean, there's a lot there in terms of trying to create that culture and trying to move from that accidental to intentional culture. What would you say are the for a company that's having problems keeping people, for a company that's having challenges attracting and keeping the right talent? Where do they start? Where would you suggest an organization start? Because this is I mean, to be able to build that tradition, that takes time. That starts today.
Right.
What are the first couple of steps that they should take?
Well, the first step they should take, and this is going to sound counterintuitive, but we don't teach employees about the financial value and the financial intelligence they need to be able to actually cover the cost of their employment. So that's step number one is, and I actually had one client say this to me, we want to be a great place to work, but we're not a social charity. Right? We want to be a great place to work, but we're not a social charity. So we're not here to, just write checks for people to come in, do some work and go home every day. We're here to make a profit. And employees need to understand that there's a cost to their doing the work they need to do. And so I had one senior level client who said to me, in our world, if you don't make 3 times your salary worth in value, you're not doing your job.
So let me. This is I think what I think is that total comp conversation. Going to someone and say, "Hey, you cost me $42,000 in salary, plus another X number of dollars in benefits. So you cost me $60,000 to keep me at this company. I just want to
Yep.
let you know that, and that's why I'm looking for you to make $240,000 a year. So you cover that because that's what I need. And that's where you started with. This may sound counterintuitive, but you tell them this is why I'm asking you to do this because this covers the nut for you.
Yeah, it covers, and it kind of goes with the brand. It goes back to the brand promise. See, and this is another thing that most companies don't talk about. If you go to employees and say, "What's the brand promise?" If they don't know the brand promise, then I was talking to a CEO last week, and I said to him, Stephen, most employees don't know why they're hired. They're not hired to do work. They're hired to deliver on the brand promise. And if you don't deliver on the brand promise, well, what's the point?
So
And I'll tell you who doesn't deliver on the brand promise is most state employees at state universities don't deliver on brand promise. What's the brand promise for some community college, right?
So give me an example of a brand promise. A brand promise that you've worked with recently, because I don't know if necessarily everybody, including myself, 100% understands what that means. Tell me what that means.
So the brand promise is what's the experience the customer or the person you're involved with will experience using your brand. And so if they're not, so I'll give you an example of a great customer experience. Every time I go to Harris Teeter, I'm always happy. If I walk down the aisle and I see coffee and it says two for $7.99, and then I see another sign that says $5.99 each, I can go up to anybody in the store and say, "I'm confused. What's the price?" And they'll tell me, and they'll say, "Don't worry about it. You'll get the lower price." And I do. And I do things at Harris Teeter that they go. I always tell people they do great things. So, simple things like the price of this chicken didn't ring up properly. Okay, here's the money back and take the chicken. I don't want the chicken for free. Nah, take the chicken. It's no big deal. It's just fried chicken. It's great customer service. I love it. I tell that story every time, and people just go, "They let you go out? They gave you the money back on the chicken?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's just, it's a couple bucks. They didn't care. They want to make me happy. I'm there every week. I'm spending $70 every week. They don't care. They probably know that because of my ID number."
Yeah. Wow. So being able to get, I mean, this kind of goes back to those core values. If they can articulate what it is, I mean, in that conversation with that customer saying, "Hey, I've got to head to the next customer just because I've got to be respectful of my next customer." If they understand what that brand promise is, that could be the cornerstone for how they govern all of their decisions, how they govern their behavior in the future. And if they can come up with that brand promise, then, or if they are familiar with that brand promise, it becomes very easy for them to operate underneath.
Yeah. So going back to that customer leaving that client, our brand promise is never to be late for an appointment. We hate breaking that promise. I got to go. I wasn't late for you. I wasn't late for me. I haven't been late in 6 months. Please don't make me late. Our brand promise is not to be late and never to speed to make up the difference.
So I'm just writing down some stuff for myself. I think I am learning a number of things here. As every time I talk to people smarter than me.
I'm not a rocket scientist, man. I'm just an average Joe that pays attention.
Well, I think there's some real nuggets here. So I think the first one you said is the counterintuitive one, which is having that total comp conversation with your employees, telling them this is the nut for you, and this is why I have you in this role, because this is what I expect of you in this role. So now they have a clear understanding of why they're there, what umbrella they're operating under, and what is the goal of that role.
Yeah. So the financial nut is really important because they have to say to their employees, "I can't go broke supporting you. I'm not in business to go broke supporting you. I'm in business. We're in business together. So I can give you more money by growing the business. If I grow the business because people love our service, you can have more money. If I don't grow the business and we go backwards, you're not going to work and I'm not going to work. We both lose, we both win."
What's number two? What's the next step, or another step that you would suggest people take?
Wow. The next step is, I would say, be very lenient in forgiving for mistakes until people really know what the mistake is. And number two is definitely, are they making the mistake because they don't have the skill to do it, or are they making the mistake because they don't want to do it? So making the mistake because they don't know how to do it, you can train them on how to do it. But if I teach you how to make coffee and you consistently don't let the water get hot enough, even though I taught you, then you don't want to do it. And if you don't want to do it, that's a different issue than you can or can't do it. If you can do it and you don't want to, we got a problem. If I teach you how to do it and you do it right, there's no problem.
So is it a want to or a can do issue is what I wrote down there?
It's both. It's both. Okay. Can they do it? Do they want to do it? If they can't do it, teach them how to do it. But once they know how to do it, they have to want to do it all the time.
So tying this back to the data, I mean, if you've got, speeding metrics, site that they spent on time with a customer when they were supposed to arrive, did they arrive early? Did they arrive late? All that you've got all these metrics. The next question, that's why this next question is not about, hey, you're right or wrong, so much as did they want to behave the right way, and can they behave the right way? If they can, that means they have the right training. but you got to make sure that they have the right training first, or they're aware of what they need to do. And if you start to lean in with that, I'll call it empathy, understanding of whether they get the situation or not, then you'll probably find a better answer as opposed to just saying, oh, this person out of hand is just a terrible employee.
Right. Absolutely. So you always give them the benefit of the doubt and check to say, can you do this? Do you have the competencies to do it? Do you understand how to do it? Show me you know how to do it. And if they know how to do it, then you say, okay, so nobody should call me up and say you didn't do it right, because I know you can do it right. And if the employee goes, well, I had to get to my next appointment and I didn't want to be late, you say, well, what's the rule? The rule is call the customer and say you're going to be late, or reschedule 15 minutes in advance. Yeah. Or you call somebody else to say, can you go pick up this call for me because I'm going to be late?
Or in the case of this Comcast tech, you've been performing well in the role for the last 5 years, and all of a sudden COVID kind of comes into this situation, and you've had to skip out a couple times because you had to take a personal phone call because guess what? Your mother is not in good shape.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden it's hey, what's going on? And there's a personal issue that's affecting your ability to perform, as opposed to saying, hey, you're just out of hand or a terrible employee.
Yeah, and personal issues always take precedent. And if there's too many personal issues, well, then you have to say, well, where is the line that I draw? Because you don't want to be a jerk. And like this person, the Spectrum person, he went from a factory job to Spectrum because they were doing, because the factory was like being jerks. So of course I don't know the whole story, right? But sure. He made it sound like they were being jerks. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. So yeah, you just got to go. I mean, look, some people run into bad luck regularly, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's life. It happens to everybody. You lose somebody. I mean, we're all in a terrible shape right now. Anybody that's walking around saying my life's great has got to be lying to you, right?
Agreed. If you feel like your life is on rails, gosh, you're going to be derailed pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, so we all know our life, but there are people that have tough times all the time because they're just not smart enough to do things, and that doesn't mean they purposely try to create trouble. It's life for them, and it's sad, and I'm lucky that I don't have that situation. Well, look, I go through hard times. I mean, I go through hard times a lot, and I just I'm just different mold and a different thing, and I just go, well, I'm lucky for the good things I have, and I'm grateful for the good things I have. But if I sat down and made a list of all the nasty things that happened to me in my life, people be like, woo. People might have said, wow, how did he put up with all that stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean I think that's a whole nother topic there in terms of sort of mindset, topic,
right?
Yeah.
Yep. That's a different mindset.
Yeah. So I heard number 2 is be lenient and forgiving, because and here's why I think I like that. And for me personally, I've learned a lot of this in the last number of weeks, months, years, and that is oftentimes I heard a fantastic quote that says, "Be kind to others because they're fighting a battle just like you." Kind of to your point just a little earlier, right?
Yeah.
You may not understand the situation enough. So kind of lean in first with a question and trying to understand why and what's happening first before you just lean in and automatically jump to, I know what happened here. I think it's kind of what I'm hearing from you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we have a comment. I can't see the full screen to see what the last part is.
Jerry said, good practice to follow seems like it is common sense that it is not common to some.
Yes, that's correct. So that's part of that forgiving part, right? How many times have you made mistakes and people didn't forgive you and they overrode? And I think that's one of the problems we have in the country right now is we're so tight. We don't have enough fun. We're not relaxed enough. We're so tightly wound, and we're slapping people upside the head for every little mistake. I mean, and I'm talking simple stuff, right? I can't say what happened to me, but I mean, I had a situation where somebody emailed me back saying that's not appropriate to do that. And I was like, really? So we're too tight. We're too rough. We're too hard on each other. We don't forgive each other. Especially now with all we're going through, nobody's saying, God, we went through an insurrection, we went through Black Lives Matter, and we went through a pandemic in 1 year. People need to not be given such heavy negative feedback.
Yeah. Wow.
They should be going, are you okay? That was pretty rough for you. It didn't go well. It didn't go well for us. Did it go well for you? And, how can we do it differently instead of going, oh, man, you were a jerk today.
It's funny because, a lot of people say when you write, you should write like a third or fourth grader could read, because if you can write at that level, not only does it show your mastery and understanding of the topic, but then it's accessible to anybody. If my third or fourth grader does something wrong, I don't immediately jump in and say, yeah, you knucklehead, yada yada yada, exclamation pound sign. I say, hey,
Right.
kiddo, what happened there? What? And I think what I'm hearing from you is, why don't we treat other adults the same way? I mean, if you started treating employees that same way, say, hey, what's going on? Gosh, you're taking some time off during the workday, which I didn't expect. What's happening here? That person might lean in and say, yeah, my mother's got COVID. And my dad
right,
too,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. We're just not doing it, Yeah, it's just.
So I see that we've got about nine more minutes before we come to the.
We're having too much fun.
Yeah, no, I this whole culture thing is really interesting to me, and it feels to me like this is a perfect time and place in the world or whatever we are, that shifting how we talk to each other in the workplace is a fantastic place to start. Just treating each other with a little bit more respect, I think, is kind of the word I think you're using or alluding to build a better culture where we have respect for each other. And it's not about, the way I talk to my employees is, you don't work for me. I work for you, just as much as you work for me. And I think keeping it like that actually changes the conversation a little bit. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree, and I knocked my microphone off. See, mistakes happen. I just knocked my microphone off. Sorry, folks. Yeah, I mean, it should take you 6 to 9 months to fire somebody. As long as they don't come into work with a gun or they don't slap somebody and be violent, it should take you 6 to 9 months to fire somebody, because
And it shouldn't be a surprise, right? It should
right,
never be a
exactly.
surprise. Yeah.
It should never be a surprise. And too much work is being done where people don't know how well they're doing. So it is a surprise. So on the surprise part, so I want to tell you a story that's really interesting. Before I went to China, I was working for Charles Schwab. They had a software office in downtown Raleigh. And I was on board, and I was working in Raleigh. My boss was in Arizona. And when it came time for my 6-month performance, my boss said to me, "You're doing great, man. You're doing awesome." I'm like, "Is that it?" He goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "But there's a performance review." He goes, "Yeah, your performances, you're good." And, everything was not super, super excellent, but, all on the top side. I'm like, "Well, why is this performance thing so good and so simple?" And he goes, "Well, that's because every week you send me a weekly report. And every month you send me a monthly report. I'd be not doing my job if I didn't know what you were doing and telling you were off base." He goes, "You told me what you're doing every week. You told me what you're doing every month. And I never said don't do that. So you have to be a good performer." And so I said to him, "What percent of employees do this for you?" And he came back and he said to me, 15%. And I say that because, most people don't do the weekly reports, don't do the monthly reports. And so by him telling me only 15%, I knew I had to be in the top side. Can I have 1 second? They started doing some blowing around for the apartment. I'm going to close the door.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
So you can talk.
Yeah. Well, what I really like about this, as Jerel comes back on, is just this idea that if we lean in, what I'm learning from Jerel here is, if we start to lean in to people and ask more questions of them, as opposed to jumping directly to a conclusion, there's a whole unlock of power, I think, that occurs in that relationship with people. Jerel, what I was basically just saying, if you can hear me, is just this idea that if we start to lean more into people and uh, asking, seeking to understand why they perform, they will start to align. If you tell them, if you invite them to where you're trying to go and ask them where they are right now and what you can do to support them as a coach, look, greatest basketball teams, football teams, soccer teams, the coach doesn't tell the players, the star athletes, what to do. They say, let me tell you where we're trying to get to as a team, and I'd like you to join in. And
Mhm.
instead of trying to tell people, this is how you perform, well, that's you trying to be the athlete. Stop trying to
Mhm.
be the athlete. That's what that technician is supposed to do. You're trying to get them to the point of saying, so this is where we like to go as a company. I'd like to invite you along for the ride. Did
Yeah,
I get that right?
that's correct. And if you do it right, you end up here for 20 years like Tom Brady.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and it's really interesting that you say that because most people say they'd like to be at the same place for the long time, but they don't stay the long time. And there's a whole lot of dynamics going on. But when the common phrase we hear today is people leave because managers don't treat them right. Right. So as soon as if the manager is is 50-50 and somebody says here's a 20% raise, they're going to go, well, I can have a 50%. Even if I have another 50-50 manager, at least I have 20% raise in my pocket. Whereas if the manager is great, you're going to go, I don't know if I want to go take 20% and be miserable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Well, we're coming up to almost done here. I feel like I have learned a number of things. I mean, one of the things that I learned about is just this idea that intentional versus accidental culture. Accidental is you just kind of let it happen. Intentional is you live it, you breathe it. And like in the case of Baker Roofing, it doesn't have to be that complicated to do it. It
Mm.
just needs to be a measuring stick that you can activate. And by activate, I mean it's something that people can understand the behavior that they're supposed to exhibit. Lots of times people put core values, but they say, here's our core values, customers first. Well, in what way? Does that come before employees or behind employees? Right?
Right, right.
Uh, so I think that's the first thing I learned is this idea that creating an intentional culture is you kind of leaning in and activating what you believe and communicating that with others and helping them understand it and see it as well. Um, total comp, having that total comp conversation with employees. Hey, you make $42,000 a year. I pay another $18,000 in benefits, so you cost me $60,000 a year. Um, that's what it cost me to pay you for you in that particular role. But the way the business is set up, I need to make 240, and this is how you do it. I'd like to invite you along for the ride.
Yeah, right.
And
And,
this,
and you,
go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to share a simple little story. I was working for an IT company in RTP, Research Triangle Park, many years ago. We had a receptionist. She was amazing. Why? Because everybody that came to work in the morning was greeted with a smile and hello and hey, how you doing? And she was bright and cheery and everybody loved her. And when they had to let her go because of headcount issues, everybody was pissed. They're like, she's just an admin and she sets the tone for the office every day. Not, she was just a secretary at the door, but everybody's packages came in, everybody's packages went out, every visitor got a badge, every visitor got checked out, and she greeted everybody with a smile.
So, bottom line here is, gosh, if you just lean into like that secretary, that admin who was sitting at the front desk, just by creating that culture, by just living it every single day, and I don't think I've ever heard from you just some lofty goals that you have to do. Is just leaning into just what you think ought to be, and that should be easy because you already believe it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you believe it, if it's the way, I mean, yeah, there's going to be mistakes, but no, if you're looking for 100% all the time, hire a robot, right?
That's right. That's right. Well,
Hire Vinay to make sure the car engine's working right. That's let Vinay know the data on the engine and let the driver know when to bring the car in.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, Gerald, I appreciate you sharing a lot of your time and your experience and your perspective on things. I suspect there's a lot of people who can take some nuggets away from this. And
Hmm.
what'll happen next for everyone who's on live is that you'll actually see little bits and sound clips of this that we're going to be deploying over the next couple of weeks here of
Okay.
Gerald. So I
Well,
appreciate the time.
I appreciate being here, and I look forward to having a coffee with you as soon as we get allowed to be out and about.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.